Okay, everyone, good morning. Welcome to our first annual Climate Finance Forum. Thank you all for coming. Some of you have traveled from other countries to get here. So welcome to Miami. Really excited to get the forum going. In case anything goes horribly wrong, we've kept the guest list small, as you can see. So, but hopefully we're looking at a bigger program next year. With that, we're honored to have the Dean Michael Heidhaus of CASE here to kick things off. Dean Heidhaus is responsible as much as anyone else, as much as Todd Crowell and everyone else, for the fact that the environmental finance and risk management program even exists. So with many thanks to you, I'll let you kick it off.
Thanks, Mario. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's super exciting to be at... Good feedback. It's really exciting to be at the first Climate Finance Forum, which hopefully will be the first of many to come, because this is such an important area in solving the big problem of our day of climate change, as well as I think a lot of the other environmental challenges we have. We need to bring the financial models and tools to bear if we're going to solve some of these big problems. But as we're seeing with the disruptions we have these days, we got a long way to go still. And so meetings like this are really important for what we're going to do. And I think that this is also, for me, really interesting because it really gets to the heart of what we're trying to do here at FIU as the University of Distinction in Environmental Resilience in the Florida State University system. And that's to combine the environmental science, the mathematics, the economics, finance, and engineering, architecture, pulling it all together so that we can build a resilient system for the natural ecosystems, biodiversity conservation, and for people as well. This forum's been put together by our Environmental Finance and Risk Management program, led up by Mario. We started this 2 years ago to bring together diverse disciplines to develop new solutions and new tools to help us create sustainable solutions that will help us get where we all know we need to be. Later on, you're going to hear Mario talk about our brand new graduate certificate in quantitative environmental finance. And this is really just our first step in this program, in our academic programs, because what we're going to need to do is train the next generation. But we're also going to be developing programs for the current generation, because as we all know, learning never ends, and we're always having to add skills we never thought we would need. And I am first among those to say I am learning things every day that I never thought I would need to do when I just wanted to study sharks and dolphins. This is really exciting to be able to help people add these skills that are going to be so important for the environmental and economic vitality, not just of our community, but of the whole world. I do want to thank a few people before we get started. First of all, Dr. Todd Crowell, who is the director of our Institute of Environment. You know, Todd's really been central in pulling together so much of what we do at FIU and helping to build the teams and partnerships, because we can't do it alone at one university. We can't do it alone in universities. This requires partnerships, public, private, every axis you can imagine. And Todd has been doing that and really had the vision for helping to create this environmental finance program. So thank you, Todd. And then also a huge thank you to the next person that we will be hearing from, David Vogel. David and his wife, Thais Vogel, started the Volo Foundation. He's a co-founder, trustee, and chief scientist of the foundation, which is really helping to shine a light and solve problems relative to the climate crisis. David is renowned as a data scientist for the quality of his predictive models. And he's brought this expertise not just as the CEO and founder of Volo Ridge Investment Management, but to Volo Foundation. And the collaborations and funding of scientists have really helped move the field forward. He's won the KDD Cup several times, and in 2013 won the Heritage Health Prize. And for me, one of the really exciting things that they're doing at the foundation is really continuing to broaden the view of what sustainability really is. So it started with climate crisis, but as they expand out into health issues that are so important to what's going on with the climate crisis, they're really helping to solve some of the major challenges of our time. So we really want to thank Volo Foundation and David and Thais for helping with funding to get us started in our environmental finance and risk management program, and for their collaboration and thinking about how we solve these big problems. And David is going to present a video for us in a little bit. So yeah, it's my great pleasure to welcome him virtually to our forum. And thank you all for being here. It's going to be a great series of panels throughout the day. And fortunately, I have to go do other things that people that wear ties have to do today. So otherwise, I would be here all day with you, which would be much more fun. But I really look forward to hearing what comes out of this and to being back here next year and clearing my whole calendar so I can spend the whole day with you. So thank you, David and Thais. Thank you, Mario. And thank you, everyone.
Welcome to the inaugural FIU Climate Finance Forum. My name is David S. Vogel. I am the CEO and Chief Scientist of Buller Ridge Investment Management, a quantitative hedge fund manager located in Jupiter, Florida. At Buller Ridge, the strategies we deploy are based on the notion that data is the most powerful tool available and superior risk-adjusted returns are possible when data. Welcome to the inaugural FIU Climate Finance Forum. My name is David S. Vogel. I am the CEO and Chief Scientist of Buller Ridge Investment Management, a quantitative hedge fund manager located in Jupiter, Florida. At Buller Ridge, the strategies we deploy are based on the notion that data is the most powerful tool available and superior risk-adjusted returns are possible when data is applied along with sophisticated mathematics, intelligent software, scientific intuition, and risk management. In 2014, my wife Thais Lopez Vogel and I began Volo Foundation with a mission to accelerate change and global impact by supporting science-based climate solutions. We have supported FIU's environmental finance and risk management program since its inception because the leaders of this program believe in leveraging environmental data for the application of data analysis to financial modeling. This program highlights the importance of understanding environmental factors and their financial influences on our communities. Sustaining and building this knowledge is the program's core mission and is also the theme for today's Climate Finance Forum. Today, my wife Thais and I are thrilled that FIU will be announcing the creation of an exciting new graduate certificate in quantitative environmental finance. This graduate certificate allows students to explore the intersection of mathematical financial engineering with environmental science and policy. To celebrate this new program, FIU has put together an extraordinary forum with educational panels full of world-class experts at the forefront of science, mathematics, data, finance, and policy. I wish I could be with you all in person for this great day, but I look forward to seeing the forum online. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge Mario Loyola's significant efforts in making the EFRM program and today's Climate Finance Forum a reality. Thank you for including Volo Foundation in the important work of FIU. You are a terrific partner, and we will continue to follow all the successes from this program. Thank you all for attending. Have a great day.
So prior to his mentioning me in that video, I invested all my allowance into Volo Ridge investment managers. So all of my, Okay, so we are just want to say again, very grateful to the Vogels, who were really the angel investors, so to speak, or at least the second round after Todd Crowell in our program and allowed us to get off the ground. The support that we got from the Volo Foundation was specifically for the launching of a graduate certificate, and I'm delighted to be able to announce today that we are launching the graduate certificate in the fall, starting with the primer in the mathematics of environmental financial engineering, which will be taught by Professor Enrique Villamor, and then over the next couple of years, we'll be rolling out the 4 new classes that were created along with the certificate and passed through bulletins 2 and 3 last year. I've worked at the Department of Defense, my first job in the government, and I thought that was a complicated bureaucracy. But it only dimly prepared me for the university process of getting a certificate and courses approved, which I can state of personal knowledge is a much more complicated process than the approvals required for the deployment of an aircraft carrier battle group. As I said, starting in the fall of this year, FIU will be offering a new graduate certificate in quantitative environmental finance. The certificate is going to offer the students the multidisciplinary skills that they will need to take leadership positions after graduation. It is hopefully the first of the academic offerings around which we're going to build our research in the years ahead. The entire certificate program will eventually be online and will be open to both degree-seeking students of Florida International University and non-degree-seeking students around the world. Those who earn our certificate will be among the world's, as Ray King Birch, who joins us from Hawaii, has pointed out many times, those who earn our certificate will be among the world's first green financial engineers, its first finance-minded environmental scientists, its first attorneys and policymakers with expertise in both environmental science and finance. The graduate certificate will showcase new and updated courses from multiple departments, including Professor Villamor's primer on mathematics of environmental financial engineering, Professor Villamor's quantitative environmental finance class, which starts to really get into the cutting edge of what we're trying to do. The class that I teach, Natural Resources Law and Conservation Finance, one of the classes I teach in the law school. Introduction to Data Science, Environmental Data Analysis for Environmental Finance, which is Professor Sukop's new course. And then finally, another Villamor offering the capstone case study course on environmental finance. So we're very excited about it. We encourage students and their teachers and advisors to explore it further. And we look forward to building a whole community of research around that certificate, in addition to the academic offerings in the years ahead. So thank you all very much. It's great to be able to announce that here today. If the panelists for panel 1 want to come up to the podium, to the tables here in front of us, we'll get right into the first panel, which will be the threat to South Florida's urban environment. Hopefully, as you can see reading down the program, this follows a sort of a semi-logical, or at least would seem to us a logical progression from the risk assessment to what we start to do about it in the property insurance context. Then after a keynote lunch with Professor Stoddard, which will be wide-ranging and philosophical, we'll go into the what's possible in the years and decades ahead through innovative financial instruments, artificial intelligence, and big data analytics. So with that, Todd Crowell, director of the Institute of Environment, who's, again, as the dean mentioned, a big part of the reason why we're all here today. Thank you again, Todd, for your steadfast support. I wonder how many people across the university think that your principal job is to take care of them, but I'm certainly one of them. With that, thank you very much, Professor Crowell and the panelists for panel 1.
Thanks much, Mario. I'm not sure if we need these, but anyhow, yeah, thanks for all the work you guys are doing, you and Enrique, King, Mike, Obey. It's super exciting to launch this certificate, and so we'll be, through informal conversations, one of our biggest challenges when you launch something new like this is to figure out how you attract that first group, that audience, right? And so we're doing some things internally, but I'll be super anxious to talk to some of you from outside FIU to get your impressions. I also thank you all for being here. I think most of you are probably on a panel. This is a really important event for us. This is a brand new program. It's been a vision that I think King and Enrique had a decade ago when they put in an NSF grant to try to create a program like this. So thank you very much for the time and effort, and we look forward to watching this program expand. So South Florida, sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, increased hurricane frequency and intensity, increased storm surge, extreme heat. You name it, we face it, especially in Miami. It's global in coastal environments, but in Miami, we have more assets to lose than any other single city in the world, based on a recent analysis. So this panel is here to talk about what the threats are to South Florida and the Miami region, but can also be expanded to global thinking, and deal with sort of different ways of talking about adaptation and resilience. So we're very pleased to have Dr. Maria Donoso from FIU and the Institute of Environment. Maria is the chairholder of our UNESCO chair in water security and gender equity. She basically runs our international water program for the Institute of Environment. Dr. Mike Sukop is a professor in Earth and Environment and part of the Institute of Environment. He's a hydrologist, an engineer, you name it. He does all things groundwater. He's done some fascinating research. I don't know how much of his new stuff he'll talk about today. He's also very, very active in our Sea Level Solution Center. Jayantha Obey Sakara, Obey for the rest of the day for all of you, is Dr. Obey. Also a hydrologist and an engineer, is the director of our Sea Level Solution Center, which is in the Institute of Environment, and has been an incredible leader in terms of bringing state-of-the-art modeling and thinking about coastal ecosystems and hydrologic issues, including precipitation, impending droughts, rainfall patterns, to the Institute and to South Florida, and has been a really major player in terms of communicating between FIU, the Institute of Environment, Sea Level Solution Center, and our stakeholders and policymakers. And then finally, we have Galen Truer from Miami-Dade County, Climate Tech and Economic Innovations. He does very cool things. I mean, he looks at climate change, resilience, economic development, technology, innovation, and I mean, as I read his bio, he's kind of a climate strategist, right? I mean, his job is to strategize us out of this climate problem we've got. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Maria Donoso.
Oh, you can stay at the...
But I need to...
Yeah, the slides, yeah.
Yeah, the slides. Well, hello, everybody. I have been given the task to basically initiate this very interesting event, which we start with the presentation of the Dean and Dr. Kroll. And if I could have the presentation, thank you. So basically, my task is to start from the global concepts and the situation worldwide and move into the situation in Florida, which will be done by my colleagues. So if we want to attain sustainability, and I think that is the dream of humanity these days, it is important that the population has the capacity to safeguard the environment and also to have adequate to what is good quantities and qualities of water. not just for human, but also for ecosystem health at the watershed level. And in addition, we need to ensure efficient protection of life and property against water hazards, which are considered the majority and the most, I will say, deadly hazards today, except for war. Droughts and floods are important to attain sustainability, and this should be done while we increase the resilience and adapt to global changes and climate variation. In other words, water security is the key challenge for the 21st century. Now, we all know water security is not just important for us humans and our needs, but it's also important for society as a whole through industry, agriculture, recreation, and of course, is substantial for the environment. When we talk about water security, we just not talk about quantity and quality only, but today it is important to consider the security of the water per se. In other words, safeguarding our resources, in particular in this area where cybersecurity becomes a major issue in the management of any resource, and water in particular is constantly under cybersecurity attacks. Unfortunately, we don't recognize or we're not informed of these, but this is a major issue that has to be taken into account. The security of the water, of the resource per se, is part and necessary for water security. Now, if we talk about water resources in the context of climate change, we can see that in the 2030, which is less than 10 years from now, there will be substantial changes in the availability of water. If we looked at this map put together by and in a document that was released at the last Global Economic Forum, we see that major parts of the world, in particular in Africa, but also in the southern part of Eurasia, there will be water shortage. And while only in the higher northern hemisphere and parts of East Asia, we see that there will be sufficient water. And these shortages will definitely put a major impact in cities in particular, but not just in the sense of water, but also in everything that relates to the activities that are being done in these urban areas. So water security is not just important for water. It is linked to many other issues such as health, and well, if we remind ourselves of what was going on 2 years ago, definitely the pandemic has shown the importance of water for human health, but also the environment. It is linked to other sectors such as the food sector, the education sector, and of course, the security sector. And as we will see today, if we have been following up the developments in Ukraine, the countries bordering Ukraine, in particular Poland, are having to identify major new plans to address the water that is being now used in camps for Ukrainians coming out of their country. So water security then is very much linked to the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. And in order to attain these goals, one has to consider what is the scope of the available resources, how to plan for the future, and how to secure the resource. In a recent study that was done by our brother center in water security, it's a UNESCO center in South Korea, out of which came this publication, which I had the privilege to be the main reviewer and also participate in some of this parts of the study. Water security is in the center between the SDGs. So we see how there are SDGs that contribute to attain water security, and there are SDGs that depend on water security. And as you see, many of the 17 SDGs, which are in the lower quadrant of this drawing, contribute to water security. But many other SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, that need to be reached by 2030, according to the UN agenda, are basically based on the availability of good quantities and qualities of water, but also of a secure water system. So these are, for example, poverty, hunger, and others. So now, from the perspective of climate change, if we look at the Paris Agreement and we relate to the SDGs as starting points, are we going to be able to respond or to actually enact the climate agreement, and how? Well, if we look at Article number 7, which relates to enhancing adaptive capacity, strengthening resilience, and reducing variability to climate change with the view of constituting and improving sustainable development, if we looked at the Sustainable Development Goal that relates to water, which is their circle in blue, if the conditions, the economic conditions, were to continue as it is now, and everything stayed like business as usual, this SDG will only be met in 2075. So forget about the 2030. This definitely brings to our attention the need to incorporate financial conceptualizations in the, not just in the policy, but also in the planning and management of water resources. And the same can be said with regard to other SDGs, especially those dependent on water. It is considered that there will need to be an investment from 2020 onwards, an average investment of $20 billion in the sector in order to attain those goals in 2070, which, as you know, is really, really difficult. So how to respond to the need for financial innovation in climate policy? There's a lot of things that we ask ourselves. What element and information we need to consider? Which efforts are taking place? Which policies we need to prioritize for the benefits of the majority of the stakeholders? And which financial innovations are to be used? So trying to respond to some of this, where definitely our new certificate program will be addressing these issues, and so will discussions in this conference. But let's just start by presenting some very interesting population statistics. If we look at how the distribution of urban populations, which is the one that will feel in more the changes in climate, we see that in North America, 82% today's population lived already in cities. 72% in the Caribbean, our neighbors down south, 48% in Africa, and 40% in Asia. Now, if we look at the next slide with regard to how has been the evolution of the urban development, we see that 38%, approximately 1.7 billion of people lived in cities in 1980. But it is expected that around 66 to 68% of the population will live in cities. And these are considering spaces where more than 500,000 people are living together. And by then, there will be 6.4 billion people living in cities. So for us in Miami, it is important to know these statistics, because when we talk about climate change, it's not a local item, it's a global item. Anything we do here, anything that happens in China, or whatever is the policies developing in Central or South America, it is all linked because the climate has no borders. So let's look at one final graph, which is the trends in the population. And in this graph, the curve that goes upwards, which is kind of like in a blue, marks the amount of population. But the other two curves in red and in green, the red curves relates to the number of babies born per year, and it is also extrapolated to 2050. The green curve in the bottom marks the number of deaths per year, and it's also extrapolated. And if we were to believe these statistics, the data comes from United Nations, then one would think that a little bit beyond 2050, there might be an homogeneity in terms of the number of deaths and the numbers of population. Will that help the environment? Will that help the climate? Well, this is an area that is of interest to pursue. Now, what is being done other than here at FIU, which we already know, and we see that we're in the right track? Well, there are several organizations that have already taken are doing different types of activities to introduce financial instruments into sustainability conceptualization. And one of them is the World Federation of Exchanges. And this organization, which is about 10 years old, has started to identify what are main focuses area that should be taken into consideration to include or advance the embedding of sustainability into the exchange operations. And they talk about, for example, there's a need to identify the ESG impacts. Their business strategies within the exchanges need to also consider sustainability concepts. There needs to be a consolidation of resources, and at the governance and risk management should be part of the whole process of analysis that takes place within their various institutions worldwide. And they also talk about the need to have reporting be more, not just focused on sustainability, but also more transparent. There has to be capacity building at these exchanges, and of course, more stakeholder engagement. So to finalize this first conversation with you, while we are introducing innovative climate policies, these policies themselves need to be climate or globally oriented and not politically driven. Remember, independent of what policy we are having in the US or in Argentina, China, or Russia and Ukraine, the climate is one whole system, and whatever we do here or there, it impacts the whole globe. So the policies cannot be driven just by our focus or narrowed political views, but it has to consider the policies and the environment as a whole. That's our primary focus. They have to be consistent across a number of sectors. We can have a policy that addresses climate change differently in water than agriculture or health, etc. They also needs to be realistically science-based, not politically biased. Because again, if we don't, by having policies that are politically biased in one country, we don't just affect the climate of our country, but we affect the whole system. And it has to be aimed to attain sustainable future for the security of humanity, not just one particular group, but humanity as a whole. But for that, our conversations today will address a number of important issues that are important in analyzing the needs for financial innovation in climate policy. For example, what we will see in the rest of this session in terms of the threats to South Florida's urban environment. We will also discuss later the future of property insurance in Florida, which is a very hot topic for those of you like myself that have our home insurance increased by almost 35% this year. Also, we'll talk, we will not talk, we will have a keynote speaker talking about resilience in a dynamic environment. And finally, in the afternoon, we will discuss innovative financial instruments and climate policy and how artificial intelligence and data analytics can improve environment and societal governance. So I hope you stay with us, and we will have good discussions starting from now on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Maria. We're going to go through the whole panel and hear all 4 of the presentations, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion. So, Obey.
Thank you, Todd. Can I bring my slides up, please? All right, let's see. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy that this risk and financing program is at the Anchor University FIU here, before anybody else, I hope. And I think this is something that we have needed. So I'm going to talk about some of the science, and I'll be talking about, what is the threat to us in South Florida. I've worked at the national and global level, like for DOD, but today I'm going to focus more on I'm going to talk about these threats, but also it's not all bad news. There are ways forward, and I'm going to kind of cover some of that as well in my short talk here. Let me see, how do I move slides? Okay, so first of all, some of you probably are from here, South Florida is very unique. I mean, we don't teach this type of stuff in the textbooks, other parts of the country. We have very low topography, high groundwater tables, sandy soils, and very porous limestones. One of the most complex water management systems in the world. This combination combination of these factors themselves make this problem even more complex for us to handle, this question of resiliency. With that, the other thing that we have to recognize that water resources system was developed in the 30s to 50s by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and you see some features of that, what we call the primary system, the secondary system, and the tertiary system. They're all interconnected. But interesting thing is, I read all those documents from the 50s. They never talked about sea level rise or climate change. And I talked to somebody who had worked in the 60s. He asked his boss, should we not think about sea level rise and saltwater intrusion? And his boss told him that, let's leave it for the next generation. Guess who is here now, right? So that's what we have here. Anyway, so the climate change outlook, and I think like Todd mentioned, we have these compounding effects of many things. An obvious one is the rising temperature, very robust. Signal, I think it's going to increase. And with that, we have this urban heat spiral that you have on the upper right hand. Sea level rise and storm surge, very clear that we have it. The threat is already here. Saltwater intrusion, I think Mike will talk about some of that. Rising groundwater levels. And the other aspect is the changing rainfall pattern. This is where I particularly said changes here, because the climate models are not very robust in terms of predicting those, and I will talk about that later on. And the frequency and magnitude of storms. And you see all the threats that we have. I won't talk about the septic tank issues and others, which Mike may cover. So what are what does the climate future look like? You have these 3 panels. The first panel is the warming, and that's definitely in terms of heat wave. You see the temperature plot on the upper left panel into the future from climate models. Up to about 2040, regardless of the scenario, we're going to have some temperature rise. But after that, if we don't manage the greenhouse gases, it's going to accelerate in the future. And you see that on the lower left panel, all these heat stresses that we are going to have, the threshold for humans in terms of health effects, we're going to have a lot more days of heat stresses, I think. In the middle panel, you see the sea level rise projection. There's a unified sea level rise projection that I chaired for this region, and that's what all the governments are using. And middle panel, the bottom graphic shows how what we call recurrent flooding of places like Miami Beach and Miami will increase in the future. So that's another threat we have, flooding. On the right-hand side, I've done some work for Southwater Water Management District in terms of future rainfall patterns. This is a question of drought. It seems like we have a drier scenarios into the future. Obviously, will affect the water management. And lower panel on the right-hand side, you see the increase in particularly the major hurricanes and storms. The science shows that the category 3 to 5 are going to increase in numbers and also increasing in intensity, and they also say that the rainfall within those storms will be higher. So this is kind of multiple threats that we're going to have. The other aspect is this is the concept of compound flooding. We have threat multipliers. In fact, that's something that we are looking at, what we call compounding effects, compound flooding. For example, you have rising sea level, high tide flooding, and we have changing heavy rainfall, and that's research that we are doing. How will the future extreme rainfall change in our area? I mean, you never heard Fort Lauderdale Airport being flooded, and that happened a few years ago or so. And then the other obviously one is the rising groundwater. So we have this compounding effects, and this is where the risk management program will have to think about these joint probabilities of these things. They may not happen at the same time. So let's see. So the other aspect I want to communicate is these are not something that we can expect in the future. These are already happening, and you see all these pictures up on the right-hand side. On the upper panel, there's a place in Key Largo in the Keys. They were flooded for 60 days continuous just from high tide flooding. I mean, these are urban environment and these new houses. And then Miami Beach obviously is the one. That video you see on the right-hand side, I took it a few years ago. This is what we call sunny day flooding. So this is already happening to us. And so it's not something that we need to think about in the future. This is a video I always use to communicate to the public. Basically, we have these control structures in the water management system. As I said, they were not designed for sea level rise. And now there are certain times of the year, particularly October, November, if there's a storm event, they cannot open those control structures to let flood waters out because the sea is higher than the inland, and that can create flooding issues and obviously the saltwater intrusion. So we can do some things about this, and we put together this adaptation portfolio, something we need to think about. Obviously, Everglades restoration, we promote that is a win-win situation. It's a good thing. It will provide more water while restoring the Everglades. The water conservation, it's the cheapest water you can have, the water that you don't use. And the water storage, there are a couple of examples of that. We may have to build levees and impoundments to store flood waters, what we call forward pumping. There is one right next to the airport here. We promote natural infrastructure. And the other aspects are green infrastructure, how we manage stormwater and wellfield relocation. So these are some of the adaptation options that are being basically analyzed and implemented. So I want to kind of put this, some of the technical aspects that I'm working on, this whole concept of non-stationarity. We typically, up to now, in the schools and in colleges, we have used this concept of stationarity. In other words, in order to plan for future, we assume that the past climate is an indication of the future. And that's not the new norm anymore. We have to come up with a new paradigm, what we call non-stationarity. Because climate change is already occurring and we need a new paradigm. So here I have on the figure on the left, it's a little technical. This is something I produced for the National Report on Sea Level Rise Projection. you have vertical, you have see the risk, and that's something that we have to deal with. And horizontal axis, you have the design life of a project. Let's say you have a 30-year mortgage, for example. Under stationary conditions, your risk will increase as your length of the design life increases. That's a natural. We can put together a risk formula and easily calculate that. But under non-stationarity with climate change, you see that upper curve, red curve, will be much higher than that risk curve that we are going to face in the future. That means this is the future condition that we have to think about. So in our program, I assume we have to start planning and coming up methods for how to plan and design for future conditions. That is something that I'm promoting even to the climate compact people. I'm chairing a water chapter for them. I always say we need to start thinking about future conditions. So the idea is that that red curve on the top, eventually you will have, depending on the design life, you have 100% risk. So in other words, it's going to fail a lot sooner than if you assume stationary condition. So in this approach, I came up with the way, how big a project needs to design for so you don't exceed that stationary risk. So I came up with this, you see on the legend there. In other words, if you're designing a project for 1 in 50-year return period, that means you have to design it for 160-year return period to manage that risk. This is the level of methodology and techniques that we have to come up with. And you see on the lower right-hand lowest text on the right-hand side, we need to come up with a new way of analyzing, basically calculations for financing or damage calculation. Your damage is a function of time. Until now, we assume the damage is not a function of time, but what our design is. So you need to come up with new methods, and the hydrologists are thinking along these lines for planning. And probably this is maybe one of the couple of final slides here. There is a lot of uncertainty in this projection. That is something we need to think about. And these uncertainties, that means you don't want to spend all your money up front, building billions of dollars worth of infrastructure. There is what we call adaptive pathway strategy. And this is something that we have been promoting here called dynamically adaptive pathways. You see, come up with different pathways, basically ending at the same end point. So the message here is that, what is the tipping point and when do you have to act and what do you need to do in the immediate future, but at the same time, don't preempt yourself doing something bigger later. That's the whole concept of dynamic adaptive pathways. And we actually applied this to a place, Little River Basin in Miami, basically came up with a portfolio of measures and how do you face these infrastructure expansions into the future depending on the climate signal, right? That's the whole message in here. And that's all I have. And here all right.
Thank you, Obey. Dr. Sukop.
All right, so I can advance the slides from here, I presume.
Once they turn them on.
Okay, I'm going to talk about groundwater, flooding, septic, saltwater, concrete, and rebar. So if you're not familiar with South Florida, this is kind of our regional setting here. The lighter brown areas show the Atlantic Coastal Ridge, which is a high region where initial development occurred, and then that's cut by these things we call transverse glades, which are where ancestral rivers flowed through, basically. And now they're mostly occupied by canals that we subsequently dug. And then you also notice down in the south of Miami-Dade County, it's very low-lying. That's the blue color down there. That's actually land, but it's also less than, I can't quite read it from where I'm at here, less than a meter in elevation. And then on the backside of the area there, it's the Everglades, which is also quite low-lying. I've marked out a couple of areas I may refer to. Up in the north is Arch Creek, and that was Miami-Dade's first adaptation action area. And then Surfside, where we recently had that tragic building collapse. And then Miami Beach both Miami Beach and Surfside are on barrier islands. And then Cutler Bay is on the mainland facing the kind of open water of the bay at that particular location. So to kind of put this all into context, the way I've been thinking about it schematically here, the ocean is really our biggest driver here in many respects. And so we have tidal fluctuations, and in the short term, we have other sea level variations due to winds and so forth, and the Florida current and so forth. But we also have long-term sea level rise that's quite, it's distinctive, and I'll show you some data that shows it. And then if we move towards the land, we encounter the barrier islands, where we have these many places tall buildings, and those are founded on piles that oftentimes are made out of concrete with rebar. And so the yellow areas there show unsaturated, you could call it soil, but it wouldn't often be soil in many, the traditional sense. But so you still have tidal propagations moving into that part of the aquifer beneath the buildings there. So it goes up and down. It's damped and time lagged, but it goes up and down there too. And then you can see the blue things are they're stormwater drainage wells, basically injection wells, and we'll look at how prevalent they are. I think they're oftentimes not adequately considered in all the work we do. And then down at depth, I have that kind of stretched out star shape there, which is to represent what I'm calling a bedding plane discontinuities. And I'll show you some pictures of these that can be seen in a borehole image in just a few seconds. So let's see. Oh, and then very important, the freshwater lens is beneath the yellow area there. And so what happens when rain falls on the barrier island, or anywhere really, that rain water is fresh, so it's less dense than the salt water underneath, and it forms a lens, which is called that because of its shape. It looks like a magnifying glass lens or something like that. And actually, I tell people it's much like a drop of oil floating in your vinegar in your salad dressing. It's kind of the same basic phenomena, minus the surface tension. So let's see. And then also some places we have peats. Maybe when they first developed parts of Miami Beach, for example, they just cut down the mangroves and didn't do anything with the soils and built right on top of those. So that's the black thing on the side of the barrier around the inland side. Moving into the bay, we have more. The water levels are still fluctuating there, and then those also can be transmitted into the mainland. The big differences on the mainland are the septic systems. You can see the little homes there sitting on top with leach fields, and the big challenge we have about 100,000 of these in Miami-Dade County, which is astounding. And the big challenge with these as water tables rise, and even if they rise episodically, they can cause considerable problems with that wastewater actually making it to the surface in some cases. The other big difference is that's where the production wells are. And so this is where our water is at risk of being contaminated by salt. And we have a long history of that type of loss of well fields to saltwater intrusion in the past. And we've taken some pretty elaborate measures that have been pretty successful, I would say, too. So we'll look at some of that later. And then finally, on the far left, I guess, what's happening now is it's been happening since I've been here, basically, but they're putting in seepage barriers between us and Everglades National Park to actually kind of keep the water in the park, which blocks off more of the flow of that water towards the city. But also notice underneath where that's shown on the far left is that the aquifer gets, the base of the aquifer rises up. So it gets less thick, and so it has less ability to transmit water as you get further out into the Everglades anyway. And it kind of it feathers out completely to nothing some distance out in the Everglades. So a lot of the water really comes in from the canal systems, from direct rain, from these injection wells, and so forth. Okay, so this is what some of this, this was motivated by Surfside. So the circle on the right is the location of the Surfside building, and then we had a well relatively nearby that owned by the city of Miami Beach in Stillwater Park. And you can see these gaps, for example, at 40 feet down, 48 feet down to 50 some. So, and then beyond that, there's another one. And if you look further down this hole, you'll see even more. So one of the notions I had, you may not be aware, Shimon Wodowinski, who's in our department, looked at data from the 1990s, and the top one is actually the tower that collapsed. And so this was already subsiding in the 1990s at a rate of about, I think, 2 millimeters per year. And so kind of a hypothesis that maybe that contributed to what was happening. It may also be due to the subsurface conditions I was just showing you. These piles are not as effective when they're those types of small caverns at depth. And these are some of the injection wells. So especially in the urban areas, if you have a building, you have a roof, you don't want to pour that water right on the street or the ground because you'd have a lot of flooding right there. So many times these, and we have them on campus here too, many times these are about 150 feet deep, and so the water is collected and then pushed basically down into the water, down into the aquifer when it falls. So these aren't even really considered in some of the models. It's kind of remarkable to me. So, and then elsewhere, like around here in the neighborhoods here, we just put in a perforated pipe. We backfill with crushed rock, and then we hope that it can accept the water when it comes. But you can see the water table is already within a few feet of the surface right there, so that you can see that it's only going to have limited effectiveness even as it is. And so if you drive around here, you probably experience this type of thing where these things are completely backed up and it takes some time for them to drain out. So we've been doing some modeling. This was for the Florida Building Commission under Obey's guidance here. We were looking at the changes in the depth to water. Of course, we looked at the elevation of the water table, but we can cast it as the depth to water here. And so in the 60 years between 2010 and 2070, you can see, and it's very difficult for me to point out, but in some of those blue areas, the lower one right next to the white numbers is Cutler Bay, and you can see the change in the colors there, that we're definitely losing depth to water. The water's getting closer and closer to the surface. And so this has a lot of implications because now you don't have the soil storage that would be necessary to accommodate rainfall, because it just fills up to the surface very quickly. And so in addition, it would be submerging utilities, foundations, and septic systems. I was looking for a video. One of the big problems we have around here with the large scale sewer systems is there's infiltration and inflow. And so when the water tables come up, the water is just kind of shooting into some of those through various cracks and so forth. And that causes problems, especially if it's salt water, with getting that salt water at the wastewater treatment plant, which can upset the biological processes there and so forth. And so, that was based on a model and the projections that Obey was talking about for sea level rise, but this is a very long record. It goes back to even before I was born. And so you can see that the observations in the well here, which is in Arch Creek, are actually quite consistent with the long-term look at the water level rises in the ocean at Key West from the tidal station. And then so that's the long-term sea level rise stuff. But on a shorter term, we have twice daily high tides that look like this, and moreover, they propagate into the aquifer beneath the land. And so this is an example that's kind of based on a circumstance from Miami Beach. This well is only 40 feet inland. You can see that PVP, the blue well, standing there in the front. And the bay where the main tidal variations are occurring would be on the far left side. But so these things can propagate inland up to like 500 meters in some cases, is what we're finding so far. It's quite interesting, and they can have some impacts. And they have impacts like this. Water is coming out of a storm sewer here. This is at 79th Street, Northeast 79th and 10th, I guess, near Little River Pocket Park. And so this water is flowing down to the Little River from here, and it's salty. We measured it, and so it's bad for your cars, and it's bad for the utilities and the concrete and everything else, right? And oh gosh, I would advance a bit if I could, but I guess we'll have to watch the whole thing. I don't really have time for that, but I don't think Mario's being too
Can you go up?
picky. Here we go. I just want to point out it's fire station number 13, so appropriate for the Friday the 13th here. So, but anyway, it bodes kind of ill for having that station in good operation and their equipment and everything else too. So it's just one spot. Now, so that's the tidal changes and the storm surge changes that might come into the groundwater, but we also have very short-term episodic effects from rainfall that percolates into the ground and causes the water table to rise quite substantially. If you look on the right axis, we had the rainfall is shown on the orange bars on the bottom. If you look on the right axis, we had a rainfall event, and I guess, let me look over here. That would have been in around early March, I guess, in 2015. And that rainfall event was less than an inch of water. And yet it caused about a 0.7 meter rise in the water table. So it's quite dramatic. And not only that, it takes about more than a month for that to completely dissipate. So the water table rises very rapidly and takes a while to come down. So we've been working on septic, and this is just a zoom into an area we've been working on. Does this thing have a pointer? Maybe it does, maybe not. I don't know where our AV guys, I'm afraid to press the other button, the red button. But anyway, let's see here if I can describe this. You can see some of the main canals coming through here, and so the septics are kind of, the septic recharge water is kind of in the middle of some of these areas here, and then they move towards the canals. So a lot of them are discharged to canals, but a fair amount are also discharged to the wells and a little bit to the Biscayne Bay as well. So we're looking at this, and there's a substantial amount going into some of those well fields like Hialeah, Preston, but I guess it also takes quite a long time, like 8.5 years average, to pass down one of these path lines. So there's a lot of other processes that can go on to help clean the water before it makes it to the well field. And not only that, there's a lot of monitoring and some minor treatment afterwards, chlorination and so forth. So we're not doing too bad. But it's an interesting problem and a lot of things we need to look at yet. Anybody that will listen to me, I sit down and pencil out this Geibben-Hertzberg relationship. I'm not going to have time to go into much detail today, but the key notion here is that you see the little H there, and that's the height of the water table above the ocean level. And then you see below that the Z, and that's the depth of the saltwater interface below the ocean level. And so if you work through these calculations, what you find out is that Z is 40 times H. That means the depth of the interface is 40 times deeper than the height of the water table above the land. And that seems almost counterintuitive because it's so dramatic, but it's a kind of a consequence of the physics of these density-dependent flows and just a density equilibrium. And it has interesting implications. So if you look, for instance, under Miami Beach, you can see here the upper parabola, which is very, very small, almost flat, would be what the water table would look like. And we're talking about a pristine situation here, no injection wells or no dewatering or anything like this going on, right? This is the perfect island, not the reality of Miami Beach. But then underneath it is quite a deep freshwater lens. So it's interesting how these things work together. And to go a little bit further with that, if you look here, so we have, this is what the water table might look like under influence of a pumping well. We have a thing called a cone of depression. And then where the canal is, we have, you can see it controls the water level in part of that area. And there's sort of a nick point as you move towards the front of the image here. And that could be, for instance, where a water control structure might be, and the water table goes down after it's being held up behind the water control structure. And then finally, there's an injection well in the back there that causes a cone of impression. And so this is how we might expect these things to behave on the water table. But let's look now at the saltwater interface below that. And so the orange surface on the bottom is that saltwater interface. And you can see where that pumping well is. It causes a huge rise in the water table beneath it. And this is actually how we lose a lot of our wells to this upconing phenomenon because it's so dramatic. Remember, a 1 foot drop in the pumping level will cause a 40-foot rise in the saltwater interface. And then similarly, the canal has a big effect like that. And notice also the injection well actually pushes the thing down. So this gives us some ways to kind of counteract this phenomenon. Okay, and then kind of thinking about upconing a little bit more here, imagine you're at Surfside and you have water in your basement, so you pump it out, and depending on how much you potentially lower the water table, you get the same type of effect here with a 40 times rise in the saltwater interface, and maybe end up having saltwater coming into your basement and affecting your infrastructure through corrosion. And so we have, the large-scale regional model here, but it seems to kind of reproduce things pretty well for the whole region. The greenish area in the front is a kind of a dynamic simulation of the salt water. And so you can see out under Surfside, there's a pretty big lens simulated by this. I don't give that too much credence because this model is really not at a resolution that's appropriate for looking at those details. But it does pretty well on the regional perspective here. So we have these things and we can improve them. I wanted to point out the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact changes indicator page, and we worked on this with them a few years ago. But these are places where you can go and get the recent saltwater intrusion maps here. So these lines show where the saltwater intrusion is at various times. We have Broward on the left and Miami-Dade on the right. We got that 1904, I believe it is, purple line in Miami-Dade County. So you can see things have changed considerably since then. And there's still some inland motion of the saltwater interface, especially in the south, where those incredibly low-lying areas were that I showed you earlier. And there are some well fields at risk here. The well fields are shown in green. So Broward has already lost more, I would say. We lost a lot in the past too, but our biggest well field is quite far inland right now, the Northwest well field, so it's relatively well protected. Okay, one quick point. I'm almost done here. What this really represents is the salt water at the base of the aquifer. So it doesn't mean that there's salt water all the way to the surface on the coastal side. And there's a little piece of data right here from El Portal, a well there, where you can see that it's low salinity in the top, and then you get down to, I think it's about 40 feet in that case, and then the salinity increases. So that's where the salt water is in that context. So we really need better resolution and 3D resolution of this whole thing to understand what's happening. Yeah, I'm done. So if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of rebar going into the ground, rebar and concrete. This is from a new building going down in Miami Beach. And there's actually active dewatering going on down here, which might temporarily bring salt water in during that process. And this is from Champlain Tower South, where there's corrosion here pretty dramatically, and we hope these kinds of things don't happen. We've been doing some modeling of the movement of salts in piles of various types I don't have time to really go into, but and we hope it doesn't end up with a situation like this at Surfside. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so Galen, we've seen all the problems. Give us a strategy.
I'm going to show you some slides, and I'll go quickly. I would like to chat. Can you guys hear me? Cool. Put it here. Okay, it's not up yet. But first of all, I am here representing Miami-Dade County and Mayor Daniela Levine Cava. And I think it's really important for you all to know that she takes this extremely seriously, right? Climate change and responding to it is a primary reason why she ran for mayor, okay? And she has 4 E's. Those 4 E's are environment, economy, equity, and engagement. And engagement means open government. And I think that what's really important today is to recognize that we have global leaders who are looking at these problems locally. That's what we just watched, right? And that is super important. I've worked with these folks regularly, and other people in the government have. And I think it's really critical that as we go forward with finance, that we have that same relationship, that kind of porous relationship, and the space in academia where you can push the boundaries more. But all 4 of those things, environment, economy, equity, and engagement, are essential. My role as the climate tech and economic innovation lead is to bring the environment and the economy pieces together, right? But this is engagement, this is open, accessible government, and equity is going to underlie and cut through all of that. Because if we don't take care of and think of the people who are most vulnerable and have been left out, we're not going to win with climate change. We're going to lose. We got it. That's my intro. I'm super excited to be here. And Slides? No? All right, maybe not. It doesn't really, I can start right now. So I got my PhD at the University of Miami, looking at risk and the response to sea level rise. And I decided to get closer to government, get closer to the decisions. And I feel like I'm in a very privileged position right now, in an important moment. Next slide. I do it. Is this true? Here we go. Cool. You see this language? This is our climate change rider for Miami-Dade County. This is everything that we add explicitly about climate change in our financial statements. This is it. It's about twice as long as it was. But this week, I got an email from the finance department that said, hey, it's that time of year. Let's take a look at it. Let's think about what we should be doing. But, you know, you can read it. It's pretty straightforward and simple. But that's because we don't have requirements and we're not having trouble getting financing, right? There's a lot of money out there when we issue bonds. But we do want to point to what it is that we're doing. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm happy to answer questions on the side. We're going to talk about what it is that is referenced in there. The county has a history of climate action. It actually goes back to the early 90s. We're a founding member of ICLEI, which is the local government organization leading on climate. We've had many goals. We've had multiple plans, including Greenprint, which was a community-wide action plan on climate and sustainability. We've had challenges implementing it. Let's just be honest, right? Like, our emissions have continued to go up, and we haven't been perfect at adaptation. But we have a bunch of new plans and new strategies falling out of Resilient 305. What's special about this strategy, it's a community-wide strategy created by Miami-Dade County in partnership with the City of Miami, Miami Beach, and the Miami Foundation, and a number of community partners. It has a bunch of actions, and some of those actions included creating better new strategies to deal with specific issues. Those include climate adaptation. So this is our sea level rise strategy. It has specific approaches that we can use, 5 approaches that we can use to deal with sea level rise over the next 20 years and to build our environment better. It also lays out a set of actions and priorities for the county. But it's a tool that the cities and any community member can use as well. That's the way that the strategy is aligned. And we're rolling it out. It's already attracted many millions, we could even say over $100 million in funding at the state level. So this is real. This is real money. It's also a good investment. The business case for resilience in Southeast Florida is something that I encourage you all to take a look at. It found that we've talked about how exposed we are, and the numbers are just phenomenal, right? But the return on investment is also really good. So for building level adaptation, which is generally private sector, it's a 4-to-1 return across the region. It's much higher in specific parts of Miami-Dade County, up to 9-to-1. And then for community-wide adaptations, those are generally public investments. It's 2-to-1 or higher. In addition, the county has a climate action strategy. This is for mitigation. And we have made the commitment to reduce, we've created the goal to reduce emissions 50% by 2030 and to get to net zero by 2050. And we're committed to that, but we can't do it ourselves. We actually have modeled it all out, and without significant changes in the power in the grid, and some significant changes in the way that we get around through mobility, we can only get 60% of the way to that 50% goal by 2030. But we're working towards it, right? And you can see where the emissions come from. Interestingly, over almost a quarter of them, 20+%, come from air travel, which is just a critical thing for us to be thinking about. That is economic transformation. We now, just this year, had the most international landings of any airport in the United States, right? Our airport has come back. It's big. It's driving our economy. But if we can't change this, those airlines that, like if we cannot create a supply of sustainable aviation fuel and make ourselves competitive, that sector is threatened, right? We have 7 approaches similar to the sea level rise strategy. We created approaches that the county can follow and also the community can follow. Just laying out the pathwork. These are linked specifically to where our emissions come from and also where we think there are opportunities to transform our economy. We can take a look at those. You can dig into it. It's great. Another strategy that has come out of Resilient 305 and the leadership of the mayor is Biscayne Bay Recovery Plan. The Biscayne Bay Task Force was also started by Commissioner Sosa, I should say. But it has led to Arella Begay as the Chief Bay Officer, set out a number of, it's basically put in motion a whole set of actions that can clean up the bay. And the folks here have done a ton of work that's relevant to this. And then we also have a heat strategy that will be coming out. And so these are a lot of plans about what we're going to do or the way that we should work. But what is super critical right now is that we do it. We don't have time. Yeah. This is the thing. I was talking with some people from the Nature Conservancy, and we were talking about incubators and startups, right? How do you get venture capital into the most scalable solutions, right? And they were saying they've been running this Techstars startup for the last 3 years, and they're kind of reassessing how they go forward. They think it was successful. They definitely brought up a number of companies, but the thing that they're thinking about is that we don't have a ramp anymore, right? There isn't that 5-year, 10-year ramp to get to 2030. That's 8 years away, less. So
Great.
That's where we are.
Thank you very much, Galen. All right, so we're scheduled to start the second panel in about 10 minutes, so we're supposed to have a break. Let me suggest, we got started about 15 minutes late for this panel, so feel free to get up, go get coffee, get snacks, but let's open it up for 10 minutes while you get snacks and stuff. Yep.
Thank you. What is the consensus of sea level rise that has already occurred in South Florida on average? We're talking about a foot and a half already. What is the scientific consensus?
Obey, you want to take it?
Well, there wasn't a consensus in terms of the magnitude. There is no issue that whether sea is rising or not. So about 5 years ago, the scientific committee basically developed what they call unified sea level rise projection. And we do understand the uncertainty, so we develop scenarios for planning. So there is consensus on that, and all the local governments and regional governments are using that, and that was the best thing that could happen because we have consistent standards for sea level rise scenarios.
But I mean, there must be range.
Yes.
People, is it 7 inches, 12 inches?
Oh, it's by 2060, if I remember the numbers, it's like 20 to 40 inches, and that's a lot for South Florida.
20 to 40 inches.
Yeah, yes.
We're talking about almost between 2 and 2.5.
Yeah, right.
2000, how much have we?
2000, we have risen since about 1992, we have risen about 5 to 7 inches already.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there's a paper coming out by one of our scientists in the Institute that actually made direct measurements using buoys and satellites and all that stuff. And in South Miami, it looks like we're approaching 11 millimeters per year in some cases. Yep.
This is a question for Mike. I was wondering if you could explain the rationale behind the construction of seepage barriers. Wouldn't that increase the saltwater intrusion into the production wells?
Well, potentially to some degree, but I don't think it's as bad as people are afraid of, personally, because a lot of the recharge, remember, it comes in from the canals like kind of an arterial system and then sinks into the ground. So it doesn't really, not as much comes through the aquifer directly from over there as people think, I believe. So I'm not as worried about it. And we can remember we have to keep the water table up in this area of the county basically to keep the salt water back, and we have limits of how far we can do that anyway, right? Because otherwise we will flood every piece of land we have at some point.
So how do the ASR injection well compare to the ones approved by the SERP, the Comprehensive Everyday Restoration Plan? I know that, the ones that they have around here.
Oh.
And if they have a water treatment component to it.
Generally not, and they're much different. They're small scale compared to the types of ASR wells that they would use around Lake Okeechobee for the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Program. So they're just localized, and they're not really pumped under power. It's just usually gravity driving the flow.
And can you speak a little bit about, you said that there's about 100,000 septic tanks around the Dade County. Can you speak a little bit about with the sea level rising? What are the implications and how there's pollution and nutrition going into the lake?
Well, there's conventional wisdom that the tanks, the leach fields really don't work as well when there isn't as much unsaturated soil, if I can use that broadly, beneath them. And so as the water tables come up with sea level rise, then that will happen more frequently. And so there could be more contaminants making it into the groundwater and ultimately discharging into the canals, as my maps were showing, and then eventually making it into the bay.
Yeah, and I'll just say, of those 100,000 septic systems, we estimate about 60% of those are already compromised. And that is either because of deterioration or just because they're old. I mean, one thing we have to always remember is the newest septic systems that are built are pretty good. They're just not built for a landscape like South Florida, like Obey pointed out. And one of the things that we're doing as part of ARELA is I'm on the Biscayne Bay Health Board appointed by the mayor that ARELA runs. One of the things we're doing is something called chemical fingerprinting, and we're getting into these canals and getting into the neighborhoods to try to identify where the septic systems that are most vulnerable and failing the most are providing all of the phosphorus that is basically killing the bay. And so we're trying to come up with vulnerability maps associated with septic system failures so that the mayor and the local county governments can prioritize where they put their infrastructure money to get those neighborhoods off the septic systems and onto sewer systems. Mike?
I just wanted to point out that in the 1950s, Gerald Parker documented that the water table under Miami-Dade County had dropped by 5 feet from what it was before that. And so and then the implication of, the importance of that is that our natural areas and natural ecosystems were based on that. They evolved over long periods to fit into that kind of hydrology. So to the extent that the environmental services that they provide, we just have to take that all into context, I think.
All right, in the interest of time, help me thank the panelists. Thank you guys very much.